My boyfriend forgot my birthday, but planned a surprise party for his ex instead. That afternoon, Ethan texted me, "Come to my place tonight. I'm throwing a surprise party." A party popper emoji followed the message. I stood in my kitchen, grinning at my phone. Ethan had never been good at keeping surprises. During the 18 months we'd been together, he had ruined almost every gift by asking oddly specific questions days beforehand. "Do you still like silver jewelry? What size were those boots you kept looking at? Would you ever want a weekend somewhere with no cell service?" Subtlety simply wasn't part of who he was. So when he told me to come over that evening for a surprise party, I never questioned who it was for. It was my 28th birthday, and although he hadn't mentioned it that morning, I convinced myself he was pretending to forget so the surprise would actually work. Looking back, that was probably the last kind excuse I ever made for him. Before leaving, I stopped at a bakery for a box of cupcakes. It felt silly bringing dessert to what I assumed was my own surprise party, but Ethan had a habit of underestimating food whenever he hosted people. I also grabbed a bottle of wine he liked and a bouquet of pale yellow flowers to brighten up his apartment. By the time I reached his building, I was smiling so much my cheeks actually hurt. Standing outside his door, I could hear movement inside. Someone dragged a chair across the floor. A voice whispered something I couldn't quite make out, followed by a muffled laugh. Then another voice asked quietly, "Is she here yet?" My heart jumped. I slipped my key into the lock, stepped inside, and found myself standing in complete darkness. Then every light in the apartment came on at once. Surprise! Confetti burst into the air as nearly 20 people shouted together. Music started playing, balloons bounced against the ceiling, and for one perfect second, I believed every bit of it had been planned for me. Then my eyes found the banner stretched across the living room. "Happy 28th birthday, Olivia." Everything inside me stopped. Gold and white balloons framed the room. A large birthday cake sat on the dining table with Olivia's name written across it in pink frosting, while photographs of her hung from ribbons along the wall. And beside the cake stood Ethan. His arm rested comfortably around Olivia Brooks, his ex-girlfriend. She wore a paper birthday crown and smiled as though she belonged exactly where she was. Her hand rested lightly over his. Around us, conversations died one after another until the apartment became unnaturally quiet. It wasn't gradual silence. It was the kind that falls over a room when everyone realizes something has gone terribly wrong. Olivia noticed me first. Her smile faded. "Oh, hey, Charlotte." Ethan turned. The color drained from his face so quickly that I honestly thought he might pass out. His eyes moved from the flowers in my arms to the cupcakes, then finally to my face. "Oh, God." Nobody said another word. Even the music suddenly felt too loud. Ethan instinctively stepped away from Olivia, as if creating a little distance could erase the fact that he'd been holding her only a second earlier. "Charlotte, I can explain." I looked back at the banner. Olivia, 28 years old, just like me. We even shared the same birthday. Months earlier, Ethan had joked about that coincidence. Standing there, I realized it had never been a joke to him. Apparently, it had meant far more to him than it ever had to me. He had planned an entire surprise birthday party for his ex in his own apartment, then invited me to walk straight into it on my birthday without realizing what he'd done. For a split second, I wanted to smash the wine bottle against the wall and demand to know how a man could remember every detail of his ex's birthday while forgetting his own girlfriend's. Instead, all the anger went cold. I walked toward Olivia. The guest quietly moved aside. Ethan reached for my arm, but I stepped away before he could touch me. Olivia slowly removed the paper crown. I didn't know you were coming." I looked at her for a moment. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked genuinely confused. I held out the bouquet. "Happy birthday, Olivia." She blinked. "What?" "The flowers were for the apartment," I said. "You should keep them." She accepted them without another word. I turned to Ethan. "Nice party." "Charlotte, please." I set the cupcakes beside the cake, glanced around the room one last time, and walked out. No one followed. No one spoke. The apartment stayed silent until the door clicked shut behind me. My hands didn't start shaking until I reached the hallway. By the time I stepped outside, my vision had blurred so badly I had to stop for a second before finding my car. I had just unlocked the door when I heard Ethan shouting my name. "Charlotte, wait!" I ignored him and pulled the driver's door open, but he reached it before I could get inside. "Please, just listen." Olivia had followed him outside, but stopped near the entrance, still holding the flowers. I looked at Ethan. "What?" I got confused. I waited. "You got confused? I thought your birthday was next week." For a moment, I honestly wondered if he heard how ridiculous that sounded. "You threw your ex-girlfriend a surprise birthday party on my birthday. I know how it looks." "It looks exactly like what happened." He rubbed his face. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then tell me how it was supposed to happen." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. After a long silence, he tried again. "Olivia's been having a hard time. Her friends wanted to do something nice for her and asked me to help. I wasn't thinking." "No," I said quietly. "You weren't. It was one mistake." I shook my head. "No. One mistake is forgetting flowers. You forgot my birthday while planning hers. You invited me over without remembering what tonight meant, and when I walked in, you were standing there holding her hand." She was upset. So was I. His eyes flicked toward Olivia before settling on me again. That split-second glance told me everything. Even now, with our relationship falling apart, part of him was still thinking about her. I knew exactly where I stood. Not beside him. Somewhere behind the future he still hadn't let go of. "We're done." The color drained from his face. Charlotte, don't say that. I'm not saying it because I'm angry. I held his gaze. I'm saying it because I finally see who you are. You can't throw away 18 months over one party. I shook my head. This isn't about one party. It's about everything that party exposed. Then tell me what I'm losing. You remembered every detail that mattered to her and forgot the one thing that mattered to me. His expression collapsed. I love you. For a moment, I wondered whether he even believed those words himself. It didn't matter anymore. If he'd truly loved me, I wouldn't have been standing in a parking lot explaining why my own birthday mattered. I got into the driver's seat. He caught the edge of the window before I could pull away. Charlotte, please don't do this. I lowered the window just enough to answer. You already did. I drove away without looking back. At the end of the street, I glanced into the rearview mirror. Ethan was still standing in the parking lot. A few seconds later, Olivia walked over to him. He turned toward her. That single movement hurt more than anything he'd said all night. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had faded. I dropped onto the couch without even taking off my coat. My phone lit up almost immediately. Please answer. A few seconds later, another message arrived. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Then came the one that erased any hesitation I still had. You're being unreasonable. I read it twice. He'd forgotten my birthday, planned a celebration for his ex, held her hand in front of 20 people, and somehow I was the unreasonable one. I blocked his number without replying. As I set my phone down, my eyes drifted to the hook beside the front door. Ethan still had a key. Over the past several months, he'd gradually filled my apartment with pieces of his life. A few shirts had turned into half a closet. One toothbrush had become a drawer full of toiletries. Shoes lined the entryway. Books filled my shelves. And chargers seemed to appear in every room. Somehow, he'd moved into my life one toothbrush at a time. I picked up my phone again and called an emergency locksmith. How soon can someone get here? 90 minutes. I'll wait. While the locksmith was on his way, I grabbed empty boxes from the storage closet and started packing. I folded every shirt, paired every shoe, gathered his books, electronics, shaving kit, framed photos, chargers, and everything else that belonged to him. By the time I finished, neat stacks of labeled boxes lined the wall beside my front door. The locksmith arrived shortly after midnight and replaced every lock before leaving me with a new set of keys. As soon as he drove away, I created a temporary number and sent Ethan one final message. Your belongings are packed. Pick them up this week. Your old key no longer works. Then I blocked that number too. I stood quietly in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by boxes that only a day earlier had represented a future we were supposedly building together. I honestly believed that was the end of it. I thought Ethan would collect his belongings, return to his own apartment, and accept that our relationship was over. I had no idea he had already made plans for my home without telling me. And by the time the sun came up, he would already be telling everyone that I was the one who had destroyed his life. The next morning, I woke to someone pounding on my front door hard enough to shake the new lock. It wasn't the kind of knock that came from someone hoping to be invited inside. Whoever was outside expected the door to open because they believed they still belonged there. For a second, I lay still, trying to figure out where I was. Then my eyes landed on the stack of boxes lined up beside the front door, and everything from the night before came rushing back. The birthday banner, Olivia standing beside Ethan, and his final message calling me unreasonable. The knocking started again. Charlotte! I picked up my phone and opened the security camera feed. Ethan stood in the hallway wearing the same clothes he'd had on at the party. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair looked like he hadn't slept, and his eyes were red. Beside him was his best friend Marcus, who had always believed every disagreement could be solved if he talked long enough. Marcus leaned toward the door. Charlotte, open up. We need to talk. I slipped on a robe, walked to the entrance, and answered without unlocking it. What do you want? Please let me in, Ethan said. No. My things are still in there. They're packed. Then let me get them. You can collect them later this week. Instead of replying, he pulled out his key and shoved it into the lock. It turned halfway before jamming. He frowned, tried again, then stared at the lock. You changed it? Yes. Last night? You don't live here anymore. I practically do. You stayed here a few nights a week. That's not the same thing. I've got half my life in there. Then you'll have to take it back to your own apartment. Marcus stepped forward, trying to calm things down. Charlotte, this is getting out of hand. I looked at him. Is forgetting my birthday not out of hand? Was wrapping his arm around Olivia just another accident? Marcus didn't answer. Ethan did. I already told you she was upset. And comforting her required putting your arm around her? Ex-boyfriend, I corrected. His jaw tightened. You don't mean that. I changed the locks before sunrise. I meant it hours ago. After a long silence, Marcus tried again. You're ending an 18-month relationship over one bad night. I unlocked the deadbolt but left the security chain in place, opening the door just a few inches. This isn't about one night, I said. That night just exposed everything I'd been refusing to see. Ethan immediately reached for the opening. Charlotte, I love you. Take your hand off the door. You know I do. I looked at him. If you love me, you wouldn't have remembered Olivia's favorite cake and forgotten your own girlfriend's birthday. His shoulders slumped. I made a mistake. I shook my head. No, you made a choice, then another, and another. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the last thing I'd seen before driving away. He hadn't chased my car. He'd turned back toward Olivia. Any sympathy disappeared. Please, he said quietly, just let me come inside so we can talk. No. Then where am I supposed to go? Your apartment. He exchanged a quick glance with Marcus before rubbing his face. I gave notice on my lease. I tightened my grip on the door. You what? We'd been talking about moving in together. We talked about it. You said you wanted a future with me. I did. I never told you to end your lease. I thought it was obvious. You assumed. Marcus stepped in again. He believed your relationship was moving forward. He made a life-changing decision without asking me first. That's not fair. I looked straight at Ethan. You planned to move into my home without telling me, threw your ex a birthday party on my birthday, and somehow you think I'm the unfair one? His expression hardened. You're twisting everything. No. I held his gaze. I'm finally seeing everything exactly as it is. Frustrated, he slammed his palm against the side of the door. The sound echoed down the hallway. Without another word, I closed it, locked the deadbolt, and walked away. For another 15 minutes, I could hear muffled voices outside. Ethan pleaded. Marcus argued. At one point, Ethan shouted that I was making him homeless. Standing on the other side of the door, I realized something that hadn't fully sunk in the night before. Standing behind that locked door, I realized Ethan wasn't asking for another chance. He expected me to rescue him from every decision he'd made. Eventually, the hallway fell silent. I didn't go back to sleep. The following morning, my manager asked me to step into her office. As soon as she closed the door, she said, "We received a very unusual phone call." My stomach sank. From who? A woman claiming to be Ethan's mother. I stared at her. What did she say? That you'd thrown her son out with nowhere to go and that she was worried about your mental state. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She called my workplace? She wanted to know whether you'd been acting irrationally. I explained everything from the beginning. The birthday party, Olivia, the breakup, the locks, and Ethan ending his lease without ever telling me. When I finished, my manager leaned back in her chair. So let me get this straight. He threw his ex-girlfriend a surprise birthday party on your birthday, and his mother thought calling your employer was the appropriate response? Apparently. She shook her head. I told her your personal life isn't this company's business, and if she contacts us again, the call will be documented. Thank you. She nodded. Keep every text, every voicemail, and every email. People willing to involve someone's workplace rarely stop after one attempt. Her advice proved right faster than either of us expected. That evening, I got home and immediately noticed fresh scratches around my new lock. I checked the security footage. Earlier that afternoon, Ethan had stood outside my apartment trying to force his old key into the lock. When it wouldn't turn, he tried again, looked around the hallway, then hurried away. I saved the security footage in multiple places. Something told me I wasn't done dealing with Ethan. The next morning, an unknown number texted me. You need to give me my key back, I replied once. Your key doesn't work anymore. Pick up your belongings before Friday. His response came almost immediately. I can't move everything. I don't have anywhere to put it. That's no longer my responsibility. You can't keep my property. I'm not. It's packed and waiting for you. A few seconds later, another message appeared. I'm calling the police. I stared at the screen for a moment before sending one final reply. Go ahead. Just be prepared to explain why you tried to force your way into my apartment after I told you we were done. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then never came back. The following evening, 2 police officers knocked on my door. We received a complaint that you are refusing to return someone's belongings. Come in. The boxes were stacked neatly by the entrance, each one labeled. One of the officers looked around the apartment. You packed all of this? Yes. When did you ask him to collect it? I showed them our text messages, then pulled up the security footage of Ethan trying to unlock my door with his old key. The older officer watched the recording twice before asking a few more questions. So he doesn't legally live here? No. Is his name on the lease? No. Does he receive mail here? A few online orders, but he changed the delivery address without asking me. His official address has never been this apartment. The officer nodded and called Ethan. Mr. Carter, we've confirmed your belongings are packed and available for pickup. Your name isn't on the lease, and the tenant has withdrawn permission for you to enter the property. Even through the radio, I could hear Ethan arguing. I've basically been living there. That's not the same thing legally, the officer replied. You have until Friday to collect your belongings. If you try to enter the apartment again without permission, you could be charged with trespassing. That ended the conversation. Before leaving, the older officer turned to me. You've handled this the right way. Just keep documenting everything in case it continues. I will. For a moment, I thought that might finally be the end of it. Then my phone rang. Another unknown number. I answered without thinking. How dare you humiliate my son? Ethan's mother demanded. I didn't. You called the police on him. No, he called them on me. He has nowhere to live because of you. He still has his apartment. Not for long. He gave notice because you agreed he was moving in with you. I never agreed to that. You'd been talking about it for months. We talked about the future, I replied. That's very different from telling him to give up his lease. We talked about the future. That's not the same thing as telling someone to end their lease. You led him to believe it. No, he assumed it. She fell silent for a moment before speaking again. He trusted you. He made a decision without asking me first. He made one mistake. He didn't forget to buy milk, I replied. He threw a surprise birthday party for his ex-girlfriend on my birthday. That doesn't justify ruining his life. I'm not ruining his life. I'm refusing to clean up after his decisions. Her tone turned colder. You owe him. I don't owe him anything. He gave up his home for you. He gave it up because he assumed something I never promised. You'll regret this. I don't think I will. I ended the call and blocked the number. That's when something finally clicked. That's when I finally understood what Ethan was doing. He had stopped trying to win me back. Instead, he was rebuilding the story for everyone else, cutting out every detail that made him look guilty until he became the victim. At the time, I believed that was the biggest lie he could possibly tell. I was wrong. The following afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, the caller introduced herself quietly. "Charlotte, it's Olivia." And before the conversation ended, she told me something that changed the entire story. Olivia called the following afternoon. I stared at the unfamiliar number for a few seconds before answering. Over the previous 2 days, every unknown call had brought another argument, another accusation, or another attempt to drag me back into Ethan's mess. I expected more of the same. Instead, I heard a quiet voice. "Charlotte? Yes? It's Olivia." For a moment, I considered hanging up. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been standing beside my boyfriend beneath a birthday banner with my flowers in her hands. Nothing about that memory made me want to continue the conversation. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she said carefully, "but I think you deserve to know what really happened." Something in Olivia's voice made me stay on the line. She didn't sound defensive or angry. She sounded ashamed. I pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "I'm listening." She took a breath. "I didn't know you and Ethan were still together." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He told me you'd broken up about 2 weeks before my birthday. He said it was over and that you were both moving on." I tightened my grip around my coffee mug. "So he invited you to the party?" No. I contacted him first." "You did?" "When we dated years ago, we always joked about sharing the same birthday. I texted him early because I thought he'd be busy." "And then?" "He said he wasn't celebrating this year." She hesitated. "After that, we just kept talking." "Every day?" "Pretty much." Her voice dropped. "He said he'd been thinking about us again. He admitted he'd made mistakes and wondered if we'd simply met at the wrong time." Everything suddenly started making sense. "So you thought the party was something his friends organized," she finished. "I had no idea you were coming." I believed her. The confusion I'd seen on her face that night finally made sense. Then she quietly added, "There's something else." "What?" "He asked if we could get back together." My stomach tightened. "He said he wanted to take things slowly because the breakup with you was still fresh." Fresh. The word echoed in my head. The night before, we'd had dinner, planned a weekend away, and talked about repainting my spare room. "I swear," she said softly, "if I'd known the truth, I never would have gone." "I know. I'm sorry, Charlotte." "So am I." The silence between us lasted a few seconds before she spoke again. "I left about 5 minutes after you did." "You did?" "I asked Ethan if what you'd said was true. He kept changing his story. First you misunderstood, then you were unstable, and eventually he admitted he'd forgotten your birthday." She let out a tired laugh. That was when I realized I didn't know him nearly as well as I thought. I leaned back in my chair. Until that call, I'd believed Ethan had chosen Olivia over me. The truth was worse. He hadn't chosen either of us. He'd been trying to keep us both until one of us forced the decision. Before hanging up, Olivia said something that stayed with me. "You didn't ruin his life." "What do you mean?" "He ruined it the moment he decided he could lie to both of us." After the call, the apartment fell silent again, but my thoughts didn't. For the first time since the breakup, I stopped wondering whether I'd overreacted. Instead, I found myself asking how long Ethan had been living 2 different lives without either of us realizing it. That evening, he reached out again, this time by email. The subject line read, "Please read." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Charlotte, everything has gotten completely out of control. Olivia misunderstood. You misunderstood. My mom is only trying to help. Please stop making this bigger than it needs to be. Let's meet somewhere neutral. After everything we've shared over the last 18 months, we owe each other one conversation. Ethan." I read it twice. What caught my attention wasn't what he'd written. It was everything he'd left out. I noticed what wasn't in the email. There was no apology, no admission that he'd lied to Olivia, and not a single mention of forgetting my birthday or throwing the party. The entire email read as though the relationship had simply fallen apart on its own, with no one responsible. I deleted it without replying. The next morning, my apartment manager called. "Charlotte, we've received another complaint." "What happened this time?" "Someone reported shouting and repeated domestic disturbances coming from your apartment last night." I almost laughed. "I wasn't even home." "You weren't?" "I worked late. We checked the building's access logs after hearing your side." She paused for a moment before continuing. "You were right. Nobody entered or left your apartment after you got home, and there was no activity matching the complaint." "So it was false." "It appears that way." She assured me the report would be documented and thanked me for cooperating. As soon as we hung up, I knew exactly who had made the complaint. Ethan wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. He was trying to create a history of accusations, hoping that if enough complaints existed, people would eventually stop asking whether any of them were true. Friday morning arrived, and a moving truck pulled into the parking lot. Ethan wasn't driving it. His mother was. Marcus climbed out of the passenger seat without saying a word. I opened the door before they knocked. "His things are by the entrance." Marcus quietly started carrying boxes outside while Ethan's mother remained in the apartment, looking around as though she expected to find something else to argue about. "So this is how it ends?" she asked. "This is how Ethan chose to end it. You made my son homeless. He ended his lease without asking whether he actually had somewhere else to live. He trusted you. He assumed something I never promised." She folded her arms. "You talked about living together. We talked about a future. We never made a final decision." "That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." She stared at me for a long moment. You're unbelievably selfish. I met her eyes. You've met me 4 times. You don't know me well enough to decide that. She scoffed. I know enough. No, I replied calmly. What you know is your son's version of the story. She didn't answer, so I continued. Ethan assumed I'd forgive him. He assumed he could move into my apartment. He assumed forgetting my birthday wouldn't matter. Every problem he's dealing with now started with assumptions he never bothered to confirm. Her expression hardened. You're cruel. I'm honest. Marcus returned for the final box, loaded it into the truck, and closed the back door. As his mother climbed into the driver's seat, she looked at me one last time. This isn't over. I simply closed my front door. Arguing would only have given her what she wanted. I believed that once Ethan had all of his belongings, this would finally end. Instead, things escalated again the very next day. A certified letter arrived from his attorney demanding more than $10,000. According to the letter, I owed Ethan relocation expenses, storage costs, and compensation for emotional distress because he had supposedly relied on my promise that we would live together. I couldn't believe someone had actually put those claims on paper. A coworker recommended an attorney, so I scheduled a meeting that afternoon. He listened carefully, read every text message, reviewed the security footage, and asked only one question. Did you ever tell Ethan he could move into your apartment? No. Do you have any messages saying he could? No. He smiled. Then his entire case depends on proving a promise that doesn't exist. I forwarded him everything I had collected since the breakup. Text messages, emails, security footage, police reports, and photographs. By Monday morning, my lawyer had finished the response. It made 3 things clear. Ethan had ended his own lease without securing another place to live. We had never agreed to move in together, and any further attempts to pressure or intimidate me would be treated as harassment. The letter ended with a single sentence. Any further contact will result in legal action. I honestly thought that would end it. Instead, it only made Ethan push harder. His attorney called back that same afternoon. They're willing to settle, he said after my lawyer put the call on speaker. Settle what? My lawyer asked. If your client reimburses Ethan's relocation expenses, we'll withdraw the emotional distress claim. My client isn't paying anything. There has to be some room for compromise. Not without evidence. Ethan relied on her promise that they would live together. Then show me the promise. A brief silence followed before the attorney tried another approach. They discussed moving in together. So do thousands of couples, my lawyer replied. Talking about a future isn't the same as making a legal agreement. When nothing else was offered, he ended the call. I think we're finished. After he hung up, I looked across the desk. They know they can't win, don't they? They know the case is weak, he said. They're hoping you'll get tired and pay just to make this disappear. They're wasting their time. He smiled. I thought you'd say that. The following evening, I stopped at the grocery store after work. I had barely picked up a basket when someone grabbed the handle. Marcus. He looked almost as exhausted as Ethan. Can we talk? No. Just 5 minutes. I'm not interested. A few nearby shoppers slowed their carts, pretending to browse while listening. Ethan's having a hard time, Marcus said. I'm sure throwing a surprise birthday party for your ex while you're dating someone has consequences. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You don't understand what he's dealing with. I understand perfectly. He's dealing with the consequences of his own choices. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. He's living with his parents now. That was his decision. He honestly thought you wanted him to move in. He assumed that. I never promised it. He stepped in front of my cart again. You could end all of this. How? Help him with the deposit on another apartment. I stared at him. So you think I should pay for the man who forgot my birthday, lied to both Olivia and me, had his mother call my employer, sent police to my apartment, and threatened me with a lawsuit? Marcus looked away. I'm just saying everybody made mistakes. I pushed my cart around him. No, Ethan made choices, and now he's living with the consequences. He followed me into the next aisle. You used to love him. I did. So where did that woman go? I stopped beside the cereal shelves. She walked out of his apartment the night she realized she wasn't the only woman in his future. Marcus sighed. I'm only trying to help. No, I said quietly. You're trying to save him from consequences he created himself. By then, a store manager had noticed Marcus following me through several aisles and walked over. Is everything all right? I've asked him more than once to leave me alone. Marcus immediately stepped back. I wasn't trying to cause any trouble. The manager nodded politely. She asked you to stop, sir. I'm going to ask you to leave. Marcus looked at me one last time, hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't. He finally walked toward the exit, and I realized everyone around Ethan was trying to solve the mess he'd created instead of asking why he'd created it in the first place. 2 mornings later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, 2 detectives introduced themselves and explained they were investigating a theft complaint. What was supposedly stolen? One detective checked his notebook. Ethan Carter claims you removed several electronics and pieces of camera equipment from his apartment after the breakup. I blinked. I've never been inside Ethan's apartment. He spent almost every night at mine. Both detectives looked up. Never? Never. Then where are the missing items? I honestly don't know, but I do have security footage showing everything that left my apartment. I invited them inside and pulled up the recordings from the day Ethan collected his belongings. The footage showed Marcus and Ethan's mother loading every labeled box into the moving truck while Ethan stood nearby watching the entire process. One detective paused the video. Did he claim anything was missing before they left? No. And he watched every box being loaded? Every single one. The detectives exchanged a brief look before one of them quietly closed his notebook. We'll need to speak with Mr. Carter again. The detective never explained what would happen if Ethan's report turned out to be false, but he didn't need to. His expression said enough. The moment they left, I called my lawyer. Ethan filed a false police report. Instead of sounding frustrated, he almost sounded pleased. That actually helps us. I frowned. How does another lie help? Because every false accusation damages his credibility. At some point, it stops looking like bad luck and starts looking like a pattern. I'd rather he stopped. I doubt he will. People who refuse to take responsibility usually convince themselves that one more lie will fix the last one. Unfortunately, he was right. The following morning, my receptionist called. Charlotte, Ethan's downstairs. He says it's urgent. Don't let him upstairs. Security already has him in the lobby. I'll be right down. When the elevator doors opened, I found Ethan waiting beside his mother. He looked exhausted. Dark circles framed his eyes. He'd clearly lost weight, and he carried himself like someone who hadn't slept since the birthday party. As soon as he saw me, he stepped forward. We need to talk. We really don't. The detectives came to my parents' house. Because you filed a false report. I didn't lie. You accused me of stealing property that was never in my apartment. They're still missing. You watched every box leave my place. You packed them. Exactly. So now you're claiming I somehow stole things I'd never even had? Before he could answer, his mother cut in. You've destroyed his reputation. I haven't said a single word about him publicly. You turned everyone against him. No, I said calmly. His own choices did that. She ignored me. You've ruined his future. Ethan started doing that the moment he decided celebrating his ex mattered more than respecting his girlfriend. By then, people across the lobby had slowed down to watch, and security was already edging closer. Ethan lowered his voice. I don't want to fight. Then leave. Instead of moving, he hesitated. I can't stay with my parents anymore. I waited for him to continue. I just need somewhere to stay until I find another apartment. I stared at him. You seriously expect to move back in here? Just temporarily. You still think that's possible? I know you. I shook my head. No, you knew the woman who kept giving you second chances. She isn't here anymore. His expression crumbled. I've changed. It's been a week. I can prove it. You already have. He frowned. What does that mean? It means every decision you've made since we broke up has reminded me why I left. He took another step. I only helped Olivia because I felt sorry for her. I held his gaze. No, you were trying to keep both relationships alive until you decided which one you wanted. He didn't answer. A security officer stepped between us. Sir, it's time for you to leave. Ethan lingered for another moment, waiting for me to stop them. I didn't. As security escorted him toward the exit, his mother pointed at me. You'll regret this. I gave her a tired smile. I already regret giving him 18 months of my life. A few minutes later, my manager called me into her office. Security told me what happened, she said. His mother also called again this morning. What was today's accusation? She claims you're harassing her son. I couldn't help smiling. He came to my workplace. I noticed the contradiction too. She folded her hands. If either of them contacts this company again, we'll file a formal harassment complaint. Thank you. And keep documenting everything. I will. Walking back to my desk, I thought the situation couldn't get any more ridiculous. I was wrong. The very next evening, Ethan's attorney withdrew the settlement offer. Within hours, mutual friends started texting me. Ethan was now claiming I'd stolen thousands of dollars worth of electronics, left him homeless, and even manipulated Olivia into turning against him. Every new version pushed him farther from the truth. By the beginning of the second week, I'd stopped expecting a quiet day. Almost every morning brought another rumor or another story designed to make Ethan look like the victim. Then Olivia called. I thought you should know, she said. Ethan's been contacting me again. I closed my laptop. What does he want now? He says everything fell apart because you overreacted. I laughed under my breath. I'm sure that's the story he's telling everyone. He also asked me to tell people you manipulated me into turning against him. So you actually spoke to him? Once. And? He blamed you for everything. Then he asked if I'd give him another chance. I leaned back in my chair. After everything that's happened? He said losing you made him realize I was the person he should have chosen. And what did you tell him? I told him if he could lie to one woman that easily, he'd eventually lie to the other too. She laughed softly. So I blocked him. Then I blocked him. When the call ended, I felt lighter than I had in days. It wasn't because Ethan had been rejected again. It was because someone else had finally seen the same person I'd been trying to explain without me saying another word. A few nights later, I met one of our longtime mutual friends for coffee. She looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Is it true you're under criminal investigation? I couldn't help staring at her. What? Ethan's been telling people detectives are building a theft case against you. I shook my head. The detectives came to my apartment. They watched the security footage, confirmed every box had been returned, and left. That's the entire story. So, there isn't an investigation? There never was. She looked genuinely relieved. I thought something sounded wrong. What else has he been saying? She hesitated before answering. He told people you manipulated him emotionally, promised you were ready for marriage, convinced him to give up his apartment, then suddenly became abusive after the breakup. I stirred my coffee slowly. Notice what's missing from every version. She frowned. What? The birthday party. She looked at me for a moment before it finally clicked. You're right. He talks about moving out, the police, lawyers, and everything that happened afterward. Somehow he never mentions why the relationship ended in the first place. She nodded slowly. I hadn't even realized that. By the time we left the cafe, she apologized for believing his story. You weren't the only one, I told her. He was counting on people hearing his version before they ever heard mine. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. Something heavy crashed through my living room window, sending broken glass across the floor, while the security alarm screamed through the apartment. I grabbed my phone, locked myself in the bedroom, and called emergency services. The officers searched the area but found nothing. Whoever had thrown the brick was already gone. One of them looked around the damaged apartment before asking, "Can you think of anyone who might want to intimidate you?" I didn't have a name I could prove, but I knew exactly who came to mind. I know someone who believes every consequence in his life is my fault. The officer nodded. Keep documenting everything. If anything else happens, call us immediately. I promised I would. Sleep never came back that night. By Monday morning, things had escalated again. Someone had carved a single word into the driver's side of my car. Abuser. The scratches stretched nearly the full length of the door. Building security reviewed the surveillance footage, but whoever had done it wore a dark hoodie and kept their face hidden. There wasn't enough to identify anyone. I photographed the damage, requested a repair estimate, copied the security footage, and forwarded everything to my lawyer along with the police report. His reply arrived a few minutes later. Keep documenting everything. The pattern matters. He was right. Each incident by itself could be dismissed as coincidence. Together, they were becoming impossible to ignore. The following afternoon, another message arrived from an unknown number. Stop ruining my life, or this gets worse. There was no name attached, but I didn't waste time wondering who had sent it. Whether Ethan had written it himself or convinced someone else to do it no longer mattered. Every threat, every complaint, and every false accusation pointed back to the same thing, his refusal to accept responsibility. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, filed another police report, and added it to the growing folder of evidence I'd been keeping since the breakup. 2 days later, we walked into court. Not because I had filed anything, because Ethan wanted a restraining order against me. According to his petition, I had stalked him, harassed him, damaged his reputation, and repeatedly interfered with his life. My lawyer carried a thick binder packed with text messages, police reports, security footage, photographs, building access logs, emails, and workplace records. We had documented everything. Across the courtroom, Ethan sat beside his attorney while his mother watched from the row behind him. She never took her eyes off me. When the judge entered, everyone stood. She reviewed the paperwork for several moments before looking at Ethan. Mr. Carter, you're requesting a restraining order against Ms. Bennett. Tell me why. Ethan cleared his throat. She keeps showing up wherever I am. The judge looked up. Can you give me an example? We ran into each other at the grocery store. She raised an eyebrow. A public grocery store? Yes. What else? He hesitated. She destroyed my housing situation. The judge frowned. Explain. She promised I could move into her apartment. Then she changed her mind. Do you have any written proof of that promise? We talked about it. I'm asking whether you have messages, emails, or any agreement confirming it. No. The judge made a brief note before turning toward me. Ms. Bennett, my attorney will respond, Your Honor. He stood and handed several documents to the clerk. There was never an agreement for Mr. Carter to move into my client's apartment. He voluntarily ended his lease without confirming those plans. The documents before the court include text messages, police reports, security footage, and correspondence showing exactly what happened after the relationship ended. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully. After several minutes, she looked back at Ethan. You also filed a police report claiming your property had been stolen. Yes. She opened another report. The investigating detectives concluded that your belongings had been returned. I still believe some things are missing. The investigation concluded otherwise. His attorney leaned over to whisper something, but the judge continued reading. My lawyer spoke again. Following the breakup, my client experienced repeated unwanted contact, false police reports, workplace harassment, unauthorized attempts to enter her apartment, anonymous complaints to building management, threatening messages, vandalism to her vehicle, and damage to her home. He placed photographs of the broken window and the word carved into my car on the evidence table. The courtroom felt noticeably quieter. The judge spent several more minutes reviewing everything before closing the file and looking directly at Ethan. I have one final question. Yes, Your Honor. Did this relationship end immediately after you organized a surprise birthday party for your former girlfriend on your current girlfriend's birthday? The color drained from his face. That's much more complicated than that. The judge held his gaze. No, Mr. Carter, it appears that's where all of this began. He opened his mouth as though another explanation might finally fix everything. Nothing came out. The judge closed the file. I've heard enough. Ethan looked nothing like the man who'd walked into the courtroom an hour earlier. His shoulders stiffened, his attorney quietly lowered his eyes, and even his mother stopped glaring at me. For the first time since that birthday party, Ethan had run out of people to convince. All that remained was the evidence. The judge closed the file and looked directly at Ethan. I've heard enough. The courtroom fell silent. Mr. Carter, your request for a restraining order is denied. Ethan started to speak, but she raised a hand before he could interrupt. After reviewing the evidence submitted by Ms. Bennett, this court finds a documented pattern of unwanted contact, false reports, workplace harassment, and repeated attempts to access her residence after permission had been revoked. She glanced down at the evidence one last time. The security footage, police reports, building records, photographs, and written communications all support the same conclusion. For the first time since the hearing began, no one on Ethan's side had anything to say. The judge turned toward me. Ms. Bennett, are you requesting protection from further contact? Yes, Your Honor. Request granted. She then addressed Ethan again. You are ordered to remain at least 100 yards away from Ms. Bennett, her residence, and her workplace. You may not contact her directly or indirectly, including through friends, relatives, or any third party. Any violation of this order may result in your immediate arrest. Ethan stared at the bench in disbelief. This isn't fair. The judge's expression never changed. The court isn't here to decide what's fair. It's here to apply the law. Do you understand the order? After several long seconds, he answered quietly. Yes. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, bringing weeks of accusations, threats, and false stories to an abrupt stop. At least that's what I believed. Outside the courthouse, Ethan's mother was waiting near the parking lot. The moment she saw me, she marched toward us. You've destroyed my son's life! Before she could get any closer, my lawyer stepped between us. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you stop. She manipulated everyone. No, he replied calmly. Your son created his own problems. The evidence simply caught up with him. For a moment, she looked ready to argue with him too. Instead, she turned toward Ethan. He never looked at me. He barely looked at his mother. Without saying a word, he walked straight to his car and drove away. Watching him leave, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until then. He wasn't silent because he had accepted responsibility. He was silent because he had finally run out of explanations. 8 days later, my apartment's front desk called. Ms. Bennett, Ethan Carter is downstairs asking to see you. I immediately looked toward the framed copy of the restraining order sitting on my kitchen counter. He isn't supposed to be here. He says he only wants 5 minutes. I don't care if he wants 5 seconds. Please call the police. Security kept him in the lobby until officers arrived. By the time I reached the security cameras on my phone, they were already placing him in handcuffs. He never resisted. He simply looked exhausted. Later that afternoon, the investigating officer called to let me know Ethan had been arrested for violating the restraining order. He spent the night in jail, and at the follow-up hearing, the judge extended the order to 2 years and placed him on probation. That was the last time I ever saw Ethan in person. For the first time since my birthday, I finally believed the worst of it was behind me. Life became surprisingly quiet after that. The broken window was replaced, my insurance covered most of the damage to the car, and I added a few more security cameras around my apartment. For the first few weeks, I still woke up whenever my phone vibrated, expecting another anonymous complaint or another threatening message. Nothing happened. After a few quiet weeks, I finally realized how exhausted I'd been. As life settled down, mutual friends gradually filled in the rest of Ethan's story. He was still living with his parents, and from everything I heard, home had become tense. Legal bills continued to pile up, his mother blamed everyone except him, and his father reportedly asked the one question nobody else seemed willing to ask. How do you forget your own girlfriend's birthday? No one had an answer. His problems didn't stop at home. Because Ethan worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm, news of his arrest eventually reached Human Resources after coworkers recognized his name in the court records. I never contacted his employer, never posted about him online, and never tried to damage his reputation. The consequences came from his own actions, not mine. I never learned exactly what happened after HR met with him. By then, it simply wasn't my concern anymore. A few weeks later, Olivia called one last time. I thought you'd want to know, she said. What happened? He reached out again. I wasn't surprised. What did he say? He wanted another chance. And I blocked the new number. We both laughed quietly. Before ending the call, she hesitated. I still feel like I owe you an apology. You don't. I walked into that party believing I was reconnecting with someone I'd once loved. And I walked in believing I was celebrating my own birthday. She sighed. Turns out we were both being lied to. She was right. Neither of us had been the other's enemy. We had simply trusted the same person. Over the next month, more people reached out after hearing the full story. Some had been at the birthday party. Others had only heard Ethan's version and wanted to apologize for believing it. Almost every conversation ended the same way. We should have asked what really happened. I never held it against them. Rumors always travel faster than the truth, but eventually the truth catches up. About 6 weeks later, one of my closest friends convinced me to meet someone for dinner. I wasn't looking for another relationship, but I finally agreed after she promised there would be no pressure. She was right. Dinner felt easy in a way I hadn't experienced for a long time. There were no excuses, no mixed signals, and no feeling that I needed to second-guess every conversation. By our third date, we started talking about past relationships. I eventually told him the birthday story. He listened without interrupting until I finished. So let me make sure I heard that correctly, he said. Your boyfriend threw a surprise birthday party for his ex on your birthday? That's exactly what happened. He leaned back and shook his head. I honestly don't know what part of that is the worst. For the first time in weeks, I laughed without forcing it, not because the memory had become funny, because hearing someone else react to it reminded me that I hadn't imagined how absurd the entire situation had been. People still ask whether I regret walking away from that apartment without yelling, throwing the cake, or making a scene in front of everyone. I don't. If I had lost control that night, Ethan would have spent months pointing to my reaction instead of his actions. Instead, 20 people watched me quietly congratulate Olivia, leave with my dignity intact, and refuse to become the spectacle. By the time he started rewriting the story, most of those people had already seen enough to know what had really happened. Looking back, it wasn't the forgotten birthday that destroyed us. It was everything Ethan chose afterward: the lies, the harassment, the fake reports, and his refusal to take responsibility for any of it. Ironically, the harder he tried to escape responsibility, the more obvious the truth became. I never got the birthday I wanted. I got something better: the truth. At the time, losing Ethan felt like losing my future. Looking back, I realize I escaped the future that would have hurt me far more. If you've ever walked away from someone who made you question your own worth, I hope my story reminds you that protecting your peace isn't selfish. Walking away hurt, but staying would have hurt even more. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced something similar, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about betrayal, resilience, and finding the courage to start over.